At his trial back in 1928, that was the demand from the fascist prosecutor. Chilling, right? The target wasn't just a man, but a mind. A mind they thought was so dangerous it had to be snuffed out. So they locked his body in a cell. But they were about to find out you can't imprison a mind.
And you know what? From that very cell, the Italian thinker Antonio Gramsci started his revenge. Not with guns or bombs, but with pen and paper. With letters and notebooks, he put together one of the most powerful analyses of power ever written, all while his own body was failing him.
So how on earth did he pull this off? Well, we're going to follow his journey. We'll start in that prison cell. Then we'll dig into his questions about why movements fail, unpack his most famous idea, hegemony, and see how it all leads to a completely new strategy for change. And honestly, a powerful philosophy of hope. Just try to imagine this for a second. It's the 1930s. Gramsci is in a fascist prison. He's got terrible headaches, he can't sleep, his health is just collapsing. Politically, everything is lost. Fascism has won, his movements are totally crushed. And it's from this place of absolute defeat, that he begins to think, to write, and to understand. I mean, think about that. He knew he was robbed of his own future. So he dedicated his work to generations he would never, ever meet. He knew the things he was figuring out wouldn't really make sense in his own time. So he turned his personal loss into this incredible intellectual gift, an analysis that was really meant for us.
Okay, so here's the crucial thing. Gramsci wasn't just sitting in his cell feeling sorry for himself. No, he was dissecting his failure. He was putting it under a microscope. He asked this brutal question. We had the right ideas, people were suffering, so why were we so completely and utterly defeated?
You see, this was the standard thinking for revolutionaries back then. Power comes from the state, the army, the police. To win, you just have to smash the state. But Gramsci, from his cell, starts thinking, wait a minute, what if that's just wrong? What if it's, as he said, profoundly naive? He realized that brute force is really just the last resort. It's the backup plan. The real everyday work of power happens somewhere else entirely, not just in government buildings, but in what he called civil society, all those institutions like schools, the media, churches, the things that shape how we live and think. And this is where he saw that power wasn't just forced on people, it was built with their consent. The ruling class gets everyone else to accept their rule as normal, as just, the way things are. And this right here leads us to his most famous, his most powerful idea, hegemony. It's the idea that the most effective prison isn't made of steel bars and concrete walls, but of ideas. It's an invisible prison for the mind. So what does that actually mean? Hegemony is when a ruling class is so good at leading, so good at shaping the culture, that their way of seeing the world becomes everyone's way of seeing the world. Their interests start to look like the national interest. Their values just become common sense. It's not a conspiracy, it's something much deeper. All right, let's make this less abstract. Take a school, for instance. Gramsci said, look, kids don't just learn math and history there. They're also learning a kind of hidden curriculum. They learn to sit still and do what they're told. They learn to compete against each other for grades. They learn to accept that there's a hierarchy, a teacher in charge, students below. Essentially, they're being trained on how to be a disciplined worker in the economy without anyone ever saying that's what's happening. That is hegemony in action. Okay, so if power isn't a fortress you can just storm, but this invisible prison of ideas, how in the world do you fight back? Well, Gramsci's insight leads to a totally new game plan. If the real battle is being fought in our culture, in what we consider common sense, then you have to win a different kind of war first. He called this the war of position. And listen, it's not some big, flashy, overnight revolution. Not at all. It's a long, patient, grinding struggle. It's a war fought in schools, in the media, in art, in culture. It's all about building your own institutions and your own stories to challenge the dominant common sense and eventually create a new one. But come on, this kind of long-haul, generational struggle, it requires a very specific kind of mindset, right? It needs a philosophy that can keep you going for decades, knowing you might not even live to see the final victory yourself. And Gramsci, he provided that too. He called it pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. It's this incredible formula for how to think and act. What does it mean? It means your intellect, your brain, has to be a ruthless realist. You have to see the world with brutal honesty, analyze exactly how bad things are, how strong the other side is, no wishful thinking allowed.
But your will, your spirit, your choice to act, that has to be optimistic. You make a conscious decision to struggle anyway, not because you're sure you'll win, but because the struggle itself is what makes us human. Gramsci wrote this from his world, a world in crisis, seeing fascism as one of those monsters born from the failure of an old system. His analysis, written from a prison cell, really forces us to ask ourselves, when our own world seems to be in crisis, when the old ways of doing things are dying, what new common sense is struggling to be born? And what monsters might show up in the meantime?